What historical fact makes you cry? A story from my great-grandfather, who fought in Ww1. Soldiers would cease fire to pick up their men's bodies and would have a smoke together, go back to their trenches, and start firing again. Neither side of frontline soldiers actually wanted to be there, just drafted for war. Edit. Thanks for all the upvotes and awards. Dangerfield Newbie, one of the 3 black men who died in the raid on Harper's Ferry, had a letter from his enslaved wife on his person. He had been working to buy her and his children, but her owner kept raising the price. It doesn't exactly make me cry, but Albert Göring, the staunchly anti-Nazi brother of Hermann Göring, spent the Second World War helping Jews and dissidents to escape. He was caught several times, but was let off the hook due to his brother's influence within the Reich. After the war, he was shunned for his last name and his accomplishments forgotten. This soldier, I realized, must have had friends at home and in his regiment, yet he lay there deserted by all except his dog. I looked on, unmoved, at battles which decided the future of nations. Tillis, I had given orders which brought death to thousands, yet here I was stirred, profoundly stirred to tears. And by what? By the grief of one dog. Napoleon Bonaparte, on finding a dog beside the body of his dead master, licking his face and howling, on a moonlit field after a battle. Napoleon was haunted by this scene until his own death. After the Pearl Harbor attack, at least some men were alive in a pocket of air inside one of the capsized ships. Navy personnel could hear them banging on the hull and trying to signal for help, but there was no way to get at them safely. The water was full of fuel and oil, so blowtorches weren't a workable idea. And there was no way for divers to get into the ship because the damage had rendered the whole thing a death trap of twisted steel. There wasn't even any way to communicate with the trap men. So the guards at Pearl Harbor had to listen to those calls for help getting weaker and weaker, while inside everyone slowly suffocated. When they hauled the ship up for scrap later, there were 16 notches scratched onto the wall of that compartment, which means at least one casualty of Pearl Harbor lived until December 23, 1941. The Rape of Nanking in 1937. Looking up photos of what the Japanese did there left me silent for a while. They raped and murdered women, bayoneted babies, you can look up a photo of it, used the wounded as rifle and bayonet practice, forced mothers on their sons and fathers on their daughters, and made a contest out of beheading civilians. There is a Japanese newspaper article you can look up about it. It is disgusting, and the worst part about it is that the Japanese government denies most of these acts, along with a lot of other war crimes that they committed afterwards. It always shakes me to my core to know that human beings are capable of doing such horrible things to one another and smile while doing it. The Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire. The doors to the exit and the stairwells were locked, so you either had to jump out the window or be burned alive. Virginia Woolf's suicide and the note she left behind makes me fucking weep like a baby. Just the way she expresses sentiments of happiness and love to her husband, but also her guilt and struggle with mental illness, it just kills me. One of the girls in the Donner Party was fed her dead mother and told afterwards. They had an agreement to not feed people their family members, but they had broken off from the camp in an attempt to find rescue. She would randomly burst into tears about it at school years later. The whole story of the Donner Party is so horrible and sad, and it bothers me that it's just used for cannibal jokes. Teddy Roosevelt's mother Mitty and his wife Alice, who had just given birth days before, both died in the same house on the same day, hours apart from each other. In his diary entry that day, he drew a large black X and scribbled, "The light has gone out of my life." That's some heavy shit right there, man. I learned about this in a Dan Cullen podcast. During the German-Soviet War, there was a Red Army soldier who sang each night with a hauntingly beautiful voice. His comrades would give him their tea rations and scarves to protect his larynx. One night, he couldn't sing because he had gotten sick. A German soldier crawled across no man's land and tossed something into the Soviet trench. The Soviet soldiers thought it was a grenade. However, it was a package containing a letter asking if the singer was okay and if he needed medicine. A truly heartwarming moment in an otherwise horrific front. Edit. Thanks for the awards and upvotes. Seriously, though, if you are even remotely interested in history, you can't go wrong with hardcore history. I never knew that I wanted to listen to a man talk about a topic for 16 hours. That even babies weren't spared during the Nanking massacre. RMS *, Carpathia, was the first ship to arrive on the scene when the *Titanic hit an iceberg and sank. Every one of the *Titanic S705 survivors were rescued by *CARPATHIA*, which made a tremendously heroic effort that night in the North Atlantic. The scene is dramatized in *A Night to Remember, the classic film from 1958, and one of the more accurate, especially given the constraints of technology at that time. Harold Cottam, the radio operator on *CARPATHIA*, had already gone off duty when the *TITANIC*'S distress signals were received. He immediately conveyed the message to Captain Arthur Ostrom, who jumped out of bed and ordered the ship to change course. There's this Tumblr post that summarizes what happened next far better than I could. I had to sit down and stare at a wall for a while when I first read it. Most if not all the astronauts aboard the Challenger survived the explosion. It was the crash into the water that would have killed them. /r/Thigratid post is a really good sub for this type of content, since it highlights more morbid anecdotes and facts from the past. One that really stands out to me from the subbies, this image of the Filipino zoo girl that was on display in the Coney Island Zoo in 1914. She was bound by ropes and people tossed peanuts at her. It's just heartbreaking to see something like that happen, especially to a child so young, but human zoos were a thing up until as late as 1958. Irish unmarried moms were sometimes required to live in institutions, raising their own babies until they were adopted. Imagine knowing how cute your kid was, taking care of it, knowing you couldn't keep it. Sometimes they were as old as 2 or 3 when adopted. The movie Philomena dealt with this topic. The killing fields in the tree the Red Khmer used to kill infants and small children by smashing them against it. One of the most haunting things I have ever read about. When Alexander Hamilton's eldest son died, his second child Angelica Hamilton had a mental breakdown and she never recovered. Sometimes, her family would walk into a room with only her in it, and she would be speaking to her dead brother. The oldest recorded name for a cat was from ancient Egypt. The cat's name was Nejum, which means sweetie. It used to be common for a raped woman to be allowed to marry her rapist so as to not get in trouble for being raped. Almost a quarter of Europe's military-aged males died in WWI. The total number of deaths includes from 9 to 11 million military personnel. The civilian death toll was about 6 to 13 million. The casualties in individual battles were insane. For example, 306,000 people died at the Battle of Verdun over the course of 1916. At the Battle of the Somme, almost 1 million were wounded or killed. The end of a Sappho poem. Beyond all hope, I prayed those timeless days we spent might be made twice as long. I prayed one word, I want. Someone, I tell you, will remember us. Even in another time. That quote always make me tear up. Ww1 Mercy Dogs, they would go out into no man's land and find wounded soldiers. They would bring medical supplies for the soldiers to patch themselves up. Or if the soldier was too mortally wounded, stay and comfort them in their final moments. The torture and murder of Junko Furuta. What they did to her would make the cartels cringe, but the worst part of her sordid case is that all of the people involved in her death were given slaps on the wrist and are roaming the streets of Japan today. Left square bracket. Edit. Thank you to everyone who gave this post awards. I appreciate it very much. Have a nice day. The assassination of Aurelian. So pointless. He could have achieved so much. It's gotta be the story of the Halifax Explosion on December 6, 1917. A ship with a cargo full of TNT caught fire when another ship accidentally hit it at low speed. It was enough to cause sparks, which ignited the benzol, which then caused the TNT to explode and killed over 2,000 people. One of the rail workers, Patrick Coleman, went back to the station right before the explosion and sent a telegram saying hold up the train. Ammunition ship afire in harbor making for Pier 6 and will explode. Guess this will be my last message. Goodbye boys. He died along with many others. There's a beautiful shanty about it called Fire and Flame by the Longest Johns, which is very poignant and always makes me cry. Something about the sacrifice of Coleman and the sheer panic and tragedy breaks my heart. Edit. Let it be known that Patrick Coleman saved the lives of about 300 people aboard the trains by going back to the station and telling them to stop the trains. There are no more wolves in Ireland. There were approximately 300 infants and children that were murdered in Jonestown, being forcibly fed or injected with cyanide. I feel so much pain for all the victims, but the kids in particular make me ache with despair. This story about Sir Nicolas Winton who saved over 600 children from the Holocaust. No one knew of his story until 50 years later, when his wife found notebooks detailing the 669 kids he helped escape the Nazis.